Saint Joseph, Jesus' father, is quite a famous saint within the Catholic Church, as well in the Orthodox Church. I'm also sure that you've seen churches, big and small, named Saint Joseph in honor of him. You may also know many men or boys with the name of either Joseph or Joe, as it is quite a popular name. So now I'm going to tell you all about him. Really, we don't know too much about Saint Joseph. Specifically in the New Testament, he is only mentioned a few times. He's mentioned in two books in the New Testament, in the book of Matthew and the book of Luke. In St. Paul's letters, most of the old ones in the New Testament, they don't even mention St. Joseph. Regardless, these two Gospels, Matthew and Luke, have a few mentions of him, and from those we can learn quite a lot about St. Joseph, and I'm going to talk about those today. St. Joseph was a carpenter. And in the Gospel of Matthew, they mention that when people were listening to Jesus' teachings, they didn't really believe him. They didn't know who he was, this Jesus character, son of a carpenter. St. Joseph was not a rich man. How do we know? Well, because according to Jewish law, back then, when the first son was born, there had to be an offering to God. And the offering was either a lamb or a pigeon. Now, why were there two different types of offering? Because rich people could afford to offer a lamb to God. Poor people could not, so they would offer a pigeon. The Gospel says that Joseph offered two pigeons to God. Joseph was a descendant of King David. Also, Joseph himself was a very compassionate and gentle man. The Gospel said that Joseph was engaged to be married to Mary, and everything was fine until he found out that Mary was pregnant. He didn't understand how she could have gotten pregnant unless she had cheated or committed adultery. He didn't know what to do, but he decided not to say anything, but also to not let anyone else know, and to just go off in his separate way. Well, why did St. Joseph not want to say anything about Mary to other people? Well, according to Jewish law, if a woman committed adultery and got pregnant out of wedlock, she would be punished by death. Obviously, Joseph didn't want Mary to be put to death, so he decided to not say anything and to just back off. The Gospel explains that Joseph had a dream where he was visited by an angel who told him that Mary conceived through the Holy Spirit and that Joseph should go ahead and marry her. He obeyed the angel and married Mary. Joseph was of strong faith. Let me give you three different examples. One I just talked about, where the angel came and visited him in a dream and told him to marry Mary because she conceived through the Holy Spirit. Joseph didn't doubt it at all. He obeyed immediately because he had such strong faith. Also, when Jesus was born, a little while after, King Herod wanted to kill Jesus and was looking for him. The angel came to St. Joseph and told him that you and your family must flee to Egypt. Now, going to Egypt was a little bit of a worry because they had no family there and they would have to start their lives over. But he trusted and obeyed the angel and knew that God would take care of him. So they fled to Egypt. When Jesus was 8 days old, Joseph and Mary had to bring him to the temple to be circumcised, because Jewish law required this. So this meant that Joseph was very faithful and religious following Also, the Gospel of Luke mentions that Joseph, Mary, and Jesus would go every year to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. This meant that Joseph himself was a very religious man. Joseph loved Jesus like his own son. Let me give you a few examples. First, if you remember a little while ago, I explained how he protected Jesus from being killed by King Herod by fleeing to Egypt. They stayed there and waited till King Herod died. They wanted to go back, but they had heard that the new king was King Herod's son, who was a very bad man. So they decided instead to move to Nazareth, where they stayed. Also, when Jesus was 12 years old, he went with the family to Jerusalem again for Passover. And when Passover was done, they went back home. Joseph and Mary were in a group with people in town, and they noticed that Jesus had disappeared. They looked all over and couldn't find him for 3 days. They went back to Jerusalem and found Jesus in the temple. They looked for him for 3 days. So that means that Joseph really loved Jesus. Also, the gospel mentions that everyone looked at Jesus as Joseph's son. So this meant that people saw Joseph as Jesus' real father. What I was just telling you about St. Joseph came from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Now, there are many other stories about St. Joseph as well. But the question is, are they all true? And it really doesn't matter, because they're great stories, or what we call legends. And there are many legends about him. I'm going to pick 2 today and share them with you. The first one is that when people are reading the Gospels, they notice that St. Joseph is mentioned quite a few times, up to the point of the story I just told you, where Jesus gets lost and they find him 3 days later in the temple. So from that point onward, there is no mention of St. Joseph. Oftentimes, people will assume that when Jesus was a teen or a young man, that St. Joseph died. The story says that Jesus, when he was either a teen or a young man, held Joseph in his arms as he died. So now, many people who want to have a happy death, they will ask St. Joseph to pray for them when they die. Another legend about St. Joseph is there was a Jewish high priest who came to Mary and told her that God gave him a message that she should marry. But she didn't know which man to pick as her husband. The high priest told her she didn't have to worry about that he would find one and let her know. So the high priest summoned all of the men in the village and told them to all come the next morning and present their walking staffs. So the very next morning, many men came with their walking staffs. The high priest looked for a sign from God, and then he found one. There was a man who had a walking staff with lilies growing out of the end of it. So the priest knew that that was a sign from God. The man's name was St. Joseph. So he married Mary. So today we see many holy pictures of St. Joseph standing there holding the staff with lilies coming out of the end. I hope you enjoyed my vlog today, and I hope it helped you feel a little bit more inspired and that you enjoyed hearing about St. Joseph. He's a wonderful saint. May God bless you.